four corners of the earth and the far corridors of history. Dateline, World War II. September 1939, in the pre-dawn hours, the tenuous peace that has settled over Europe since 1919 is shattered as German forces smash across the Polish border. The attack is in response to a supposed Polish raid into Germany. That incursion, near the town of Gleiwitz, was, in fact, staged by Nazi agents in Polish army uniforms. Hitler feigns outrage and launches what is certainly the biggest counterattack in history, 53 divisions in all. Poland is a plum ripe for the picking. Forming a round salient in the west, it is trapped between two massive German pincers to its north and south. The Polish army, while imposing on paper, in reality, stands no real chance against the German onslaught. The speed with which the German forces sliced through the Polish defenses is astounding. German armored panzer divisions smashed through the Polish lines on all fronts. The Luftwaffe pounds the roads and railroads, making reinforcement impossible. Close behind the tanks come armored infantry units. They exploit the massive holes the panzers have punched in the Polish lines. Once in the rear, the panzers fan out, creating havoc, disrupting communications, and striking Polish forces from all directions. The Luftwaffe pounds the roads and railroads, making reinforcement impossible. On 2 September, Hitler is jubilant. His armies are well ahead of schedule, and equally important and somewhat surprising, Britain and France have not yet honored their commitment to come to Poland's defense. This is crucial, the Germans know, because their border with France is guarded by only 10 divisions. A rapid response by France would meet essentially no resistance. On 3 September, Hitler's war turns into World War. At 9 a.m., the British issue an ultimatum, giving the Germans until 11 a.m. to begin pulling out of Poland or face war with the West. Hitler ridicules the demand and orders his forces to continue their advance. Everywhere, there are signs of the complete destruction of the Polish military. Smashed guns, dead men and horses, thousands of bewildered prisoners. On the 17th, the reeling Poles get a knife in the back. Russian Premier Joseph Stalin, wanting to get his share in the spoils of Poland, sends Red Army forces pouring across Poland's undefended eastern border. By the 19th, Polish resistance is unorganized and sporadic. Units who stand their ground and fight are surrounded and decimated. Those who try to withdraw and regroup face annihilation by the murderously effective Luftwaffe. Desperation turns to panic as the Poles realize there is nothing the Western powers can do to protect them from the bloodthirsty dictators. By 27 September, Warsaw is forced to surrender. A Polish government in exile is formed in Paris. Western leaders, who declined to stop Hitler when he was weak, now must face the reality of Nazi strength. It is too late for Poland. Now they must be concerned with the day they themselves will inevitably have to face the Nazi onslaught. September 1939, Berlin. Hitler and the German High Command are elated. In 6 days, their Blitzkrieg tactics have sealed the fate of Poland and all but destroyed its armies. They are now free to begin moving divisions out of Poland and back to their dangerously undefended border with France. The Germans had gambled that the Western Allies would be slow to mobilize and indecisive about retaliating for the invasion of Poland. Their gamble seems to be paying off. The French, who, if they acted, would have a virtually unopposed march into Germany's industrial heartland, have inexplicably reacted only by asking the British Air Force to refrain from bombing German positions. So the French army sits in its $500 million defensive position known as the Maginot Line, nervously staring across the border as the German forces increase. The Germans, who made Blitzkrieg a household word as they streaked across Poland, have coined a new phrase for the French strategy: Sitzkrieg. The uneasy peace that results is surely temporary. While there is little visible activity at the front, in Berlin there are major changes in the long-standing plan for the invasion of France. The original called for the German armies to pour through Belgium as they had in 1914. But General Fritz von Manstein puts forth a daring new plan. It calls for a diversionary attack in Belgium to be followed by the main German thrust through the heavily wooded Ardennes, south of the French-Belgian border. Von Manstein believes that Allied armies rushing north to meet the initial threat can be cut off by the main German force and annihilated. On 10 May 1940, the plan goes into effect. Army Group B, under the command of General von Bach, plunges into Belgium and Holland. Allied troops flood north to meet the thrust, their leaders failing to recognize the fact that the Luftwaffe, which had been so successful in cutting off reinforcements in Poland, makes little attempt to impede the progress of British and French armor units. Meanwhile, General Gert von Rundstedt's Army Group A, consisting almost entirely of armor and mechanized infantry units, sweeps into the Ardennes. By the 12th, Army Group A has reached the Meuse on a broad front from Dinant in the north to Sedan in the south. Believing the Germans will need 5 or 6 days to concentrate their forces for a river crossing, the French fail to recognize the grave threat to their flank. On the 13th, 1,000 Luftwaffe planes strike the French Second Army opposite Sedan. The diving Stukas strike terror in the French defenders, who abandon their artillery positions for their trenches. With the cessation of French fire, General Heinz Guderian's mechanized infantry forces easily ford the Meuse and establish a bridgehead. On the 20th, a mere 10 days from the start of the campaign, Guderian's forces reached the English Channel at Abbeville. The German plan has worked brilliantly. The Allied armies in the north are now surrounded on 3 sides with their backs to the sea at the French port of Dunkirk. With Guderian driving up the coast from the south and Army Group B pushing from the north and east, the destruction of the British Expeditionary Force and the French and Belgian units with them seems to be but a matter of days. The English people, hearing of their army's plight, mobilize in a last-ditch effort to save their men on the coast of France. On 1 June, a desperate flotilla, made up of every available ship from the largest liner to the smallest fishing boat, begins the treacherous trip across the Channel. With the RAF providing what cover they can, the ships come in as close as possible under heavy German fire. For 3 days, the boats cross and recross the Channel until 3 June, when all British and some French and Belgian soldiers have been rescued. On 5 June, with northern France in their control, the Germans begin the second phase of their offensive. By 10 June, German forces advancing along the coast cross the River Seine west of Paris at Rouen. On the same day, the already beleaguered French are dealt another blow. Benito Mussolini, unable to resist sharing in the spoils of a defeated France, sends 400,000 Italian troops across the border into the French Riviera. By the 11th, German troops reach the Marne River west of Paris. With German armies driving south on both sides of Paris, the capital is declared an open city. The Germans, however, do not move to occupy it until the 14th. The main focus of their efforts is the destruction of what remains of the Allied armies in France. On the 14th, the Maginot Line is penetrated south of Saarbrücken by the German First Army. Now the German advances are limited only by how far the panzers can move in a day. The battle for France is, for all intents and purposes, over, and what little will to fight the French have shown fades. On 17 June, French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud resigns. He is replaced by Marshal Henri Pétain, a French hero from World War I. Pétain is convinced that France and Britain are doomed to defeat, and that dealing with the Germans will be, in the long run, better for the French than continuing this futile resistance. He announces he will ask the Germans for armistice terms. Meanwhile, the German advance continues. Guderian's forces successfully drive all the way to the Swiss border. On the 18th, the 7th Panzer Division under General Erwin Rommel captures Cherbourg as the 5th Panzer takes Brest. On 22 June, the French delegation, led by General Hunziker, goes to Compiègne Forest to sign the armistice. Hitler, not about to miss the satisfaction of dictating terms to the French, personally heads the German delegation. Fulfilling his own vision of historical retribution, Hitler holds the surrender ceremony in the same railroad car the French had used to dictate the terms of peace to the Germans at the end of World War I. General Wilhelm Keitel presents the German terms, and after hours of discussion, the French agree to them. 2 days later, Hitler travels to Paris to fulfill his lifelong dream of entering the French capital as victorious conqueror. He is jubilant. He has defied the world and prevailed. His armies have smashed every obstacle in their path, and most importantly, the great injustice of Versailles has been reversed. July 1940. With most of continental Europe in his pocket, Adolf Hitler now turns his attention to Operation Sea Lion, the pending invasion of England. He issues a directive ordering Hermann Göring's Luftwaffe to drive the RAF from the skies, establishing the air supremacy that will be necessary for a large-scale crossing of the English Channel. Throughout July, the Luftwaffe concentrates its attacks on British shipping in the Channel. Though the attacks are destructive, there is no concerted effort to gain air superiority. On 13 August, Göring's forces begin their all-out offensive to crush the RAF. Calling it Aldertag, or Day of the Eagle, the Germans send their bombers, escorted by Me-109s and Me-110s, to strike British industry and port facilities. On the first day, they fly over 1,500 sorties. The attacks continue day after day. Göring throws everything he has at the British. While the Luftwaffe does inflict enormous damage, the RAF is far from being driven from the skies. Day in and day out, they get the better of Göring's supposedly superior pilots. The RAF has several distinct advantages over the Luftwaffe. First, they are fighting over their own territory. Fuel reserves aren't nearly the concern to them they are to the German pilots flying from the continent. British pilots who are shot down parachute to safety and, in many instances, are back up fighting the same afternoon. Germans end up in POW camps. Another factor working in the RAF's favor is their use of radar. They can see the German air fleets forming up over France and direct their forces accordingly. While the Germans understand the technical aspects of the radar system, they have yet to grasp the enormous tactical advantage it gives the British, and Göring personally removes British radar sites from the German target list. As the attacks continue, the British people rally behind their protectors in the RAF. Prime Minister Churchill on 20 August comments that never in the course of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Indeed, It seems the brave pilots of the RAF are doing what no one has done to date, stopping Hitler. The German attacks, however, are taking their toll. Many of the British airfields are knocked out of commission, and by 31 August, the RAF's situation is critical. On 7 September, British authorities issue an invasion warning to the populace. On the same day, the Germans, not knowing how close they are to bringing the RAF to its knees, change tactics. Instead of continuing to target airfields, the Germans decide to start bombing London and other major civilian populations. Night and day, the Germans pound the cities, causing enormous damage. But instead of breaking the will of the people, it solidifies them. By mid-September, the RAF is recovered and is contesting the Germans fiercely. In Berlin, Hitler realizes that with winter coming on and Goering far from achieving his promised goal of air superiority, any plan for an invasion of Britain will have to wait. On 17 September, he postpones Operation Sea Lion. The Führer's plans to invade and conquer, for the first time, have been thwarted. The United States has been, in the months leading up to Hitler's aggression in Europe, content in its role as sleeping giant. Mired for more than a decade in the Great Depression, America is only now returning to a sort of normalcy. The public has no desire to get involved in a European conflict and is paying even less attention to Japanese aggression in Asia. But on 1 September 1939, the armies and air forces of Nazi Germany sweep into Poland. Hitler's Blitzkrieg is a wake-up call to the world, and though most Americans still consider Nazism a European issue, President Roosevelt decides that the time has come for America to prepare for war. On 5 September, 2 days after Britain and France declare war on Germany, Roosevelt declares a limited national emergency and extends American naval patrols into the waters of the Caribbean and the seas around the Philippine archipelago. Ostensibly merely an enforcement of American neutrality, in effect, the added American patrols free British ships for duty closer to the front. In November, Congress, pressured by the Roosevelt administration, grants the president the power to sell American military hardware to foreign powers on a cash-and-carry basis. Overnight, Great Britain becomes America's largest customer, buying 95% of America's aircraft exports and 90% of its munitions and explosives. Roosevelt also begins a domestic program of increased production with an eye toward war. He calls for an increase in production of aircraft to 50,000 a year. That number is so outlandish that Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, claims that Roosevelt is bluffing, and the Führer takes time from his busy schedule to pronounce FDR mentally ill. Across the full range of military hardware, factory output skyrockets. Production of fighter aircraft doubles in less than a year. The number of Garand rifles, the mainstay of the infantry, rises more than 300%. And production of tanks, which would be key in any attempt to stop Hitler's fast-moving armor columns, jumps an incredible 1,300% in a single year. This action by Roosevelt is not without political risk. 1940 is an election year, and Roosevelt is running for an unprecedented third term. Opinion polling, a young and inexact science, shows that even after the invasion of Poland, barely 7% of Americans believe it is wise for the United States to get involved in the war. Obvious to the president, however, is the tide of conflict currently rising all around the United States. There seems, in the president's view, little chance that the United States will be able to remain at peace while the rest of the world slips into war. And Congress has moved slowly into agreement with the president. By mid-1940, Congress approves the money necessary to build 200 warships, enough to put fleets in both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Finally, on 16 September 1940, Congress approves the Burke-Wadsworth Bill, the first peacetime draft in American history. Whether the public is willing to pay that price for what is still seen as a foreign conflict remains to be seen. The eventual tenor of public opinion will, in large measure, be decided by the aggressors. Their actions alone will prove whether Roosevelt's build-up is necessary or an overreaction.